So let me get right into it. Today, I wanted to talk about a subject that I've talked about before, but this week on Tuesday, one of the weekly webinars, now there's not very many of them that I actually watch, is the Baileys, Sam and Mark. I believe it comes out every Tuesday morning, at least for me. And I wanted to piggyback a little bit on the webinar Sam did on ivermectin. But I also think that everybody who's interested in the subject of ivermectin should absolutely go watch that video, that webinar, or whatever it is that just came out with, I think it's drsambailey.com. I'm not sure that's exactly the right website, but absolutely that should be checked out. And I just wanted to not correct anything, not by any means, but just to emphasize some things, which I have actually been over before. The reason, of course, is I'm continually, well, I don't know if I'd use the word shocked or surprised, because not too much shocks or surprises me anymore. But let's just say interested in how many of the people that I know who are allegedly in the health freedom space and community are either taking ivermectin so-called prophylactically or have taken it for a illness that they've had in the last 4 years, which they claim to be COVID. I wouldn't have expected that, maybe I would. But it's just, there's so many of them that I think it's still worth revisiting that subject, because I guess the bottom line here is this is one of those clever, they being the perpetrators or the controllers or whatever you want to call them, have a very clear strategy with so many things, of there's a conventional narrative, and then there's the alternative narrative, which always casts doubt and aspersions, and usually there's elements of intrigue and collusion and criminal activity against the dominant people and the dominant system. And that becomes the alternative narrative. Close my window here. And that's the only two things you're allowed to believe. So in this case, of course, the conventional narrative for COVID is caused by a virus, and the only possible, preventative treatment or thing you can do to stop the virus at the end of the day, because we know hand washing and masks and social distancing and all that don't really work. So you have to do the vaccine. And then along comes the so-called freedom community, and you don't need me to name any names here, but most of them have been in lockstep about this, saying, oh no, there's this pandemic for sure, and it's caused by a virus for sure. Now, we think it's a lab-leaked virus or a lab-created virus. We've been over that. But even a bigger scandal is whichever virus it's caused by, it certainly is effectively treated by this safe and effective, we've heard that one before, drug called ivermectin, which is cheap, and it's a miracle drug. And so the reason that they've suppressed that, the successful, almost miraculous treatment of this viral infection with this miracle drug called ivermectin, is because there's seemingly some clause that says if there's an effective treatment for this pandemic or this situation, then you can't fast track or some administrative words, the vaccine. So they had to, the alternative narrative goes, you had to get rid of the ivermectin story, unfortunately for us poor people, because ivermectin is such a wonderful drug. And anyways, there was a Nobel Prize given for the discovery of ivermectin, which if you know anything about the Nobel Prize process, that should make red the strongest red flags go off, joining the ranks of Obama and Begin and John Enders and a whole bunch of other Nobel Prize winners. Um, so, and they've suppressed the research and the anecdotal experience and the experience of numerous hardworking frontline doctors all out there saving lives with this wonder drug called ivermectin. And the only reason the government and the pharmaceutical companies are suppressing this antiviral wonder drug is because if they allowed that to get out, people would have an easy treatment for COVID, and then they wouldn't be able to fast track the vaccine, and then they wouldn't be able to kill us all with the vaccine. So if you're an alternatively leaning person, that's what you're meant to believe. And of course, neither of those have any relation to reality. And just to give you an idea, you hear many, many doctors, going on their various platforms and talking about a crucial point. I can't emphasize that enough. A crucial point is that ivermectin is an antiviral agent. That is crucial to the whole story. So, of course, nobody asks them ever. And up to this point, not that I've looked extensively, but I've never heard any of them, not Corey, not Cole, not Kirsch, he's not a doctor, not Mercola, not Malone, not Big Tree, nobody saying, here's how we have proven that ivermectin is an antiviral agent. Therefore, there is a plausible rationale for using it for COVID. Now, that's curious because why didn't anybody ask them? Why didn't anybody ask Peter McCulloch? How does he know that ivermectin is an antiviral agent, since it's one of the things that his clinic regularly uses and sells for people who are suffering from the viral infection called COVID? So Sam went over this, but I wanted to emphasize this because this is, again, something I've talked about before, but everybody should know this in their back pocket. They should know it cold. So if you run into anybody who touts ivermectin for treating COVID, you can pull this out and ask them. The first question you ask them, how, when did they demonstrate that ivermectin is an antiviral agent? So here's how the story goes. Our old friend Leon Cayley, who's the, quote, virologist from Australia, who wrote one of the most important papers, which I won't pull up, but it's on Sam's webinar, wrote one of the most important COVID papers because it was the paper that described I believe, the first case of isolation of SARS-CoV-2 outside of China, that is to say, in Australia. So how did he do it? Of course, he took one person who was diagnosed with COVID. How was he diagnosed? Based on the Christian Drosten PCR primers. Even though Christian Drosten says in his paper, we designed or came up with these primers without ever having access to the virus, which is an amazing sleight of hand if you think about it. How can you develop a test using a piece of something when you never had access to something, to the something. That obviously is irrational, illogical, and ridiculous. But anyway, so they used that to claim this person had COVID. Then they took some of their mucus, otherwise known as snot, didn't look for any virus in it, didn't purify it, meaning they didn't extract a virus from that, did the usual inoculate that on monkey kidney cells, take away the nutrition, add the antibiotics, add the fetal calf serum. The monkey kidney cells broke down, and in some bizarre Orwellian use of the word isolation, that becomes the first isolate, which has a name, outside of China, right? So that's called the isolation of SARS-CoV-2, which again is totally illogical, ridiculous, and anti-scientific. How is isolation obtained through the process of adding stuff to mucus? Then turns out this same, by the way, Leon, that was the same paper which we've again gone over many times, where they showed electron microscope images of the SARS-CoV-2 virions, that's individual viruses, that they obtained from this culture, with the comment that they didn't look like the usual coronavirus spiked virions until they added trypsin to digest away the outside protein coat. And when they digested it, then it looked like it had spikes, which is, it's amazing that they get away with this, but they do. And so he was the guy who did that. In other words, we found stars from pieces of wood, but only after we called a carpenter to cut the outside pieces out so that it would look like stars. That's the level of scientific discord here. So then he takes this broken down cell culture of monkey kidney cells, he inoculates that onto another culture of monkey kidney cells, doesn't use a control, or says he uses a mock control, which has nothing in it, so nothing from any inoculated monkey kidney cells, and doesn't actually describe the actual details of the mock infection. So we have no idea that everything else was even the same as in the experimental group, which means it is not a scientific paper. So then he takes this broken down monkey kidney cell, again, takes away the nutrients, adds it to the monkey kidney, a new batch of monkey kidney cells, and then takes away the nutrition, adds more antibiotics, more fetal calf serum. And in this time, he adds a little bit of ivermectin, and then he finds that the kidney cells took longer in the added ivermectin group than in the no added ivermectin group, which he claims shows that ivermectin killed the SARS-CoV-2 or inhibited the growth of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Just to be clear, at no point in this did any virus actually get discovered or found or identified. There was no point in this experiment where you could even possibly conclude that it was inhibiting the growth of the virus. All you can say is that when you take broken down monkey kidney cells with snot in it and you inoculate that onto other monkey kidney cells, and the one you add ivermectin and the other you don't, the one you add ivermectin took longer to break down than the one that you didn't add ivermectin. That's what you can say. So if you want to take ivermectin based on the fact that in case that your problem that you're experiencing symptoms with is because you have monkey kidney cells with fetal bovine serum and antibiotics and viral transport medium breaking down in your body, and you want to prevent it from breaking down as quickly, then you might have some rationale for taking ivermectin. But in order to say that, you have to say that that is the problem with COVID, and I think you would have a damn hard time proving that. So the question then is, uh, so that before I say that, that is the entire basis for the claim that ivermectin is an antiviral agent, which is the basis for the claim that it's an effective treatment for something called COVID, which is the basis for the claim that there was some sort of conspiracy against the wonderful wonder drug, safe and effective ivermectin, so that they could bring in a vaccine, which is what you were sold when you decided to take ivermectin by the health freedom community. That's the story. Now, some people will complain and comment and criticize, but I or my friend or my 20 friends, they took ivermectin and they felt better. So how do you explain that? Well, first of all, that has nothing to do with the proof, which I just went through, that ivermectin cannot possibly be an antiviral agent. So that is independent. We already know that that's the case. Ivermectin has no relationship to anything to do with viruses, nor does anything else. But you do have this observation. So how do you explain that? Well, it turns out that ivermectin is a interestingly and very toxic to the nervous system. This has been documented over and over again. It's also functions as an anti-fertility agent, which may be one of the reasons why it's so widely used in Africa. It's also widely used in animals. I just found out yesterday that most horses and most dogs who are treated by conventional vets take ivermectin basically once a month. And there's lots of neurological problems, including seizure and disorientation and other neurological problems that come about through the continual use of ivermectin. So it is not a benign chemical. That's what it is. Make no mistake about that. It is a pharmaceutical made chemical, just like many others. And it seems to have two effects. One is it has a prednisone-like effect, which means that I can guarantee that anybody who has so-called flu-like type symptoms or symptoms which we associate with COVID, which is basically an inflammatory response due to some sort of insult, not a new disease by any means, but lots of people get inflammatory responses due to a wide variety of insults. And if you take prednisone, you will feel better. You will also have made yourself dramatically worse because all of these so-called flu-like or so-called COVID-like or so-called detoxification-like symptoms are your body's way of doing a house cleaning. And it's no secret that you can stop those house cleaning responses with strong pharmaceutical drugs, and you will think you feel better, but actually now you've only stopped your body from doing its detoxification house cleaning strategy, and you will ultimately be a lot worse because that's how you heal. So make no mistake about it. Ivermectin stops the healing process, just like prednisone, just like hydroxychloroquine, just like giving, so-called monoclonal antibodies. None of them work with how we actually heal. And another interesting, I would say, a hypothesis, which I can't prove, is that one of the ways that all of these drugs work is they stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. And it turns out that the healing response is basically a parasympathetic nervous system response. So when we're relaxed and we're not stressed, and when our digestion is working, and when we're healing, that is essentially controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. When you give somebody prednisone or hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system response, which then stops the healing, causes the nervous system symptoms like seizures that you see with ivermectin in particular, and you essentially have stopped your body from healing. And so that's how it works. So the argument that Aunt Fred or Uncle Harry or whoever, you felt better, is no different. You would be better off probably taking high dose of prednisone if your only goal is to make yourself worse but feel better today. That would be a good way to do it. So I'm saying this because, unfortunately, especially in the people who one would hope know better and think more deeply about this, they still buy the hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin story. This is a boondoggle for the pharmaceutical industry, especially in veterinary medicine. And it is the only wonderful part about it is the wonder that anybody fell for this story. We will at some point, and hopefully I'll have some other input on this, get into even the question of, does ivermectin even work for so-called parasitic diseases, whether there even are parasitic diseases, because all the evidence points to that is not how it works. And I even heard an anecdotal story of a description of a study, which I haven't seen, so it's maybe unfair of me to mention this, but it's a bit like the maggots. Did the maggots kill the dog? But they've interestingly maggots are now used even in conventional medicine to clean up wounds, because maggots seem to have a good ability to distinguish between dead and dying tissue and healthy tissue. And they only eat the dead and dying tissue, leave the healthy tissue alone. And that prevents, quote, infection, because the other way to do it is to have microorganisms like yeast and bacteria and parasites eat the dead and dying tissue. So if you get the maggots to do it, then those other things have no food and you get a very clean wound. And so they did a investigation of who was better able to effectively debride a wound. That means to take away the dead part and leave only the healthy living tissue. Surgeons or maggots. And I think it should be no surprise that the maggots won hands down, even with surgeons using microscopes. Okay, I was going to show you something about what they say about ivermectin on Wikipedia. They talk about how it works using glutamine-gated chlorine channels, and that's how it increases the flow of chlorine items and hyperpolarizes the cell membrane, paralyzing and killing the invertebrate. It's safe for mammals at normal therapeutic doses used to cure parasite infections because mammalian glutamate-gated chlorine channels only occur in the brain and spinal cord. The causative ivermectins usually do not cross the blood-brain barrier and are unlikely to bind to other mammalian ligand-gated channels. So the problem with this, of course, is there are no channels in the cell membranes or in nerves or in muscle cells. There is no blood-brain barrier. The nerves don't work because of hyperpolarization and the flow of chloride ions. So this whole thing is simply just a story that has no value. Okay. That's enough about ivermectin. Again, for anybody who really wants to see the references and get more in detail in this, please watch Sam and Mark's video. I think it's drsambailey.com this week on ivermectin.